Just as a quick overview, this is over 160 works, 44 of the drawings from the Prado in Madrid. First time we've ever had a body of work of this scale in the country, so it's an extraordinary opportunity to look at one of the great revolutionary artists of their time. Also somebody who was a great humanitarian. He talks about social justice and all the sort of inequalities that he saw in society. Really very much ahead of his time in so many ways.
So you probably have heard of Francisco Goya, the best-known Spanish artist of his period, and possibly best-known Spanish artist of all time, arguably. But he was a court painter, and he also had a position at the Royal Academy in Madrid in the 1780s. So he's very much an established painter working at the highest level. And at the same time as painting portraits and religious paintings, Goya also worked on drawings and prints. So this is what we're showing in this exhibition, and what makes it so special is that all of these works on paper were uncommissioned. So he wasn't working for a patron who was paying him to make a particular kind of work. And that means Goya was free to be critical. He could voice his personal views, but also make satirical works and works that responded to current events. What Goya is really wanting to do is he wants to unmask that kind of masquerade in the social world and reveal the truth behind what really motivates us. Goya was a man of the Enlightenment. Education was a very important tool in reform. Goya knew a lot of the liberal thinkers and reformers of his time because he painted their portraits, and he was aware of political and social debates around reform of education, agriculture, the role of the church, all kinds of political issues. This here is a really key work in the exhibition, in the Caprichos. It's positioned halfway through the series, but it is a self-portrait, and it's called The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters. And here Goya is asleep at the desk, and the sleep of reason is bringing forth these monsters, the irrational, the power of the imagination.
This part of the series deals with supernatural themes, and it introduces a cast of quite extraordinary characters, witches, goblins, monsters, hybrid creatures that we really see here in Goya's art for the first time. Goya inscribed each of these drawings with the term sueños, dream, and a number on the top, or sometimes it's just the number, and an inscription at the bottom that gives us a key to the work. And so the use of this term dream. The dream was a very was a literary device that had a very long tradition in Spain, stretched back to the early 17th century, and it was a device that allowed fantasy to be used to critique society. And so Goya draws upon that device to both ridicule contemporary superstitions and ignorances and belief in creatures like goblins and witches, but he also uses it in a more allegorical way to really condemn some of the evil practices that he saw in society around him.
In the early 1800s, something very significant happens in Spain and in Goya's life, and that is the Peninsular War, which the Spanish call the War of Independence. Napoleon's troops invade Portugal and Spain in 1807, and by 1808 the Spanish resist the invasion, and that triggers the War of Independence, which then quickly descends into a civil war, and all of Spain is implicated in this 6-year brutal conflict. It starts off with scenes of some harrowing violence and even mutilation, so this is the conflict of war, and there's an extraordinary realism in that. No one else was representing war like Goya at this time. It's almost as if he's testing out believed in liberty, truth, reason, and human rights and justice for all.
I am going to talk about Goya's last years, just looking briefly at his last series of prints, dating from about 1815 to 19, and his last drawing. So we're really looking at Goya when he's 70 years of age, right through to he died when he was 82. And this period, Goya had withdrawn from the public eye. He was no longer working actively as a court painter. The last etch series that he made is this series here, the Desperados, and it's one of the most enigmatic and kind of darkest or most pessimistic sort of series of works. And Desperate kind of roughly translates as irrational folly or absurdity. And it's thought of often as conceptually kind of aligned to the black paintings, those paintings the murals that Goya made on the walls of the villa on the outskirts of Madrid in about 1819. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with those, that very bleak imagery of Satan devouring his child, witches, Sabbaths. There's a great ambiguity about the images, and they have a kind of nightmarish quality that kind of combines or melds kind of reality and fantasy, but in a dreamlike way. Really what we're seeing, they're bleaker, and it's a much more grotesque vision that we see in the Desperados. The images have been read in terms of, in relation to Carnival, the festive season when the authorities are debunked, when masquerades, and it becomes a topsy-turvy world. And in its kind of thematics, the period following Ferdinand VII's restoration to power in 1814 was a very dangerous political climate when liberals were exiled or punished, where himself had to appear before the Inquisition, and it was a dangerous political climate. The kind of liberal ideas that they'd been fighting for and that had been established in the Constitution were overturned by Ferdinand. The Inquisition was re-established, press was tied down, and so it was a bleak period, and so that is the kind of thought to